The massive ship appeared without warning above Earth's skies, blotting out the sun across 3 continents. Its crystalline hull shimmered with colors that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Within hours, every communication device on the planet received the same message, transmitted in perfect human languages. I am Queen Zathara of the Dominion Fleet. Your world now belongs to me. The voice carried an otherworldly authority that seemed to resonate in people's bones. Videos flooded social media showing the ship's impossible size, larger than most cities, hanging motionless in the atmosphere as if gravity meant nothing to it. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the broadcasts from her laboratory at the International Space Research Center. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had spent decades preparing for first contact. Nothing had prepared her for this. "The ship's not responding to any of our signals," reported Commander Jake Morrison from the military liaison desk. "It's just sitting there, waiting." Sarah studied the vessel through the telescope feeds. The ship's design defied human understanding of physics. No visible engines, no exhaust, no heat signatures. It simply existed in the sky like a floating mountain of living crystal. Waiting for what? She wondered aloud. Her answer came at precisely noon, Greenwich Mean Time. The ship's surface began to glow, and a beam of soft golden light descended to Earth. Where it touched down in New York's Central Park, the grass didn't burn. It grew greener, more vibrant than before. Within the light, a figure materialized. Queen Zathara stood 12 feet tall, her form both alien and magnificent. Her skin held the deep blue-black of space itself, dotted with points of light that pulsed like distant stars. 4 arms extended from her torso, each ending in hands with too many fingers. Her head was elongated, featuring large eyes that held swirling galaxies within them. Despite her alien nature, she moved with a grace that was undeniably regal. Humans of Earth. Her voice resonated across every speaker on the planet simultaneously. "I have come to claim what is mine by right of conquest. Your species has proven itself capable of basic space travel and nuclear fusion. This qualifies you for inclusion in my dominion." World leaders scrambled to respond. The United Nations emergency session lasted 3 hours before they managed to establish a video link to the Central Park site. President Martinez spoke for humanity. "We appreciate your introduction, Queen Zathara. But Earth is not available for conquest. We are a free species governing ourselves." The alien queen's expression, if it could be called that, remained unchanged. Her galaxy eyes seemed to find the camera through the screen. "Freedom is an illusion you grant to children," she replied with something that might have been amusement. "I have conquered 47 star systems. I have brought order to chaos across this galaxy's spiral arm. Species that resist waste resources that could benefit the greater dominion." She gestured with 2 of her 4 arms, and holographic displays appeared in the air around her. Images of other worlds, other species, all bearing the same crystalline structures that matched her ship's design. The Kethvar resisted for 3 cycles. They now serve as my dominion's finest engineers. The Mithari fought for 7 years. They now manage my agricultural worlds with unmatched efficiency. Resistance leads only to delayed integration. Sarah found herself leaning forward, fascinated despite the dire circumstances. Each species shown in the holograms appeared healthy, even prosperous. Their cities gleamed with advanced technology. But something in their postures, their movements, suggested a fundamental change. They moved like people who had forgotten how to dream of anything beyond their assigned roles. "What exactly are you offering?" President Martinez asked carefully. "I offer you purpose," Queen Zathara replied. "Humans show promise in several areas. Your mathematics are crude but intuitive. Your engineering relies on brute force methods that sometimes produce unexpected innovations. Most intriguingly, your species demonstrates unusual persistence in the face of impossible odds." She paused, and those galaxy eyes seemed to look directly at each person watching. "I have studied your history. You fight wars that last decades. You attempt to reach space with primitive chemical rockets. You split atoms with tools barely more advanced than clubs. This determination, properly directed, will serve the Dominion well. And if we refuse," President Martinez's voice remained steady, though Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. "Refusal is temporary. I have time. My ship will remain in your atmosphere. I will not attack your cities or destroy your infrastructure. That would be wasteful. Instead, I will simply wait. Your economy will collapse as your people stare at the sky instead of working. Your governments will fragment as fear spreads. Eventually, you will see the wisdom of acceptance. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving world leaders staring at empty screens. In her laboratory, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Queen wasn't lying about her patience or her methods. The psychological pressure alone would be devastating. But something in the alien's words bothered her, a puzzle her mind couldn't quite solve. She called our determination unusual. Sarah murmured to herself. Why would persistence be unusual to a species that conquers star systems? Commander Morrison heard her. What are you thinking, Doc? I'm thinking that Queen Zathera might not know humans as well as she believes, Sarah replied, pulling up her computer files on human psychology and history. She's conquered 47 systems, but she described their resistance in terms of time, cycles, years. Organized military resistance with clear endpoints. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, calling up historical data. But human resistance isn't like that. When we're truly threatened, we don't just fight with armies. We fight with everything and everyone. We make it personal. Outside the laboratory windows, the massive ship continued its silent vigil. Around the world, people looked up at the sky with growing unease. But in pockets of humanity, in small groups and individuals, something else was stirring. In garages and basements, hackers began probing for weaknesses in the alien transmission systems. In universities, physicists started analyzing the ship's impossible flight characteristics. In military bases, strategists considered options that no sane species would attempt. Queen Zathera had made one crucial error in her assessment of humanity. She had mistaken their individual determination for their true strength. She didn't yet understand that humans were capable of something. Her other conquered species apparently weren't. They could unite their madness into something far more dangerous than any organized resistance. They could turn their entire species into a weapon that thought, adapted, and refused to accept the impossible as permanent. The real response to her dominion was only just beginning. 3 weeks after Queen Zathara's arrival, Earth's economy hadn't collapsed as she predicted. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Humanity got angry. The stock markets, rather than crashing, saw unprecedented investment in aerospace and defense technologies. Governments that had been enemies for decades began sharing military intelligence. Most surprisingly, ordinary people started acting extraordinary. Marcus Webb exemplified this transformation, a maintenance worker from Detroit. He had no scientific training or military experience. What he did have was 30 years of fixing impossible problems with insufficient resources. When Queen Zathera's ship appeared, Marcus didn't despair. He got curious. The thing's gotta have weaknesses, he told his neighbor, Elena Rodriguez, as they stood in his backyard staring up at the crystalline vessel. Nothing's perfect, especially nothing that big. Elena, a retired electrical engineer, nodded thoughtfully. The energy requirements alone should be staggering. But there's no heat signature, no electromagnetic emissions we can detect. Word spread through their neighborhood, then their city. Within days, Marcus's garage became an unofficial think tank. A high school physics teacher brought equations. A mechanic contributed practical engineering sense. A computer programmer offered to model their theories. Similar groups formed worldwide. In Tokyo, a sushi chef noticed that the ship's position shifted exactly 3 centimeters every 12 hours, a detail that professional astronomers had missed. In Mumbai, a street vendor observed that pigeons avoided flying directly beneath the vessel, suggesting some kind of field effect. Dr. Sarah Chen found herself coordinating between dozens of these grassroots research groups. Her official position gave her access to government resources, but the real insights came from ordinary people asking questions that trained scientists had overlooked. The pattern's becoming clear, she reported to the emergency council. Zathera's ship operates on principles we don't understand, but it still obeys certain universal laws. Mass, energy, space-time. Something has to give somewhere. President Martinez leaned forward in the video conference. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying that 47 conquered star systems apparently never figured out how to think like humans. They probably had better scientists, more advanced technology, superior military forces, but they fought like civilized species. Commander Morrison frowned. And we're not civilized? Sarah smiled grimly. We're civilized enough to pretend we follow rules. But when survival is at stake, we're creative in ways that would horrify any rational species. We don't just adapt to problems, we turn problems into advantages. Her words proved prophetic. Within the month, human creativity began manifesting in ways that caught Queen Zithera's attention. A group of amateur radio operators in Australia discovered they could piggyback signals on the Queen's own transmissions, effectively turning her communication system into their own network. Scientists in Antarctica realized that the ship's gravitational field created predictable distortions in local space-time, which could be used for faster-than-light communication experiments. Most significantly, children around the world began reporting the same strange dreams. 8-year-old Tommy Lou from San Francisco described them to his mother. The Star Lady is sad. She thinks she has to take care of everyone, but she's scared they'll all die if she doesn't. She doesn't understand that some people don't want to be taken care of. Similar reports came from every continent. Children who had never met shared identical visions of Queen Zithara's past, a species that had destroyed itself through war, leaving her as the sole survivor, driven to prevent other species from making the same mistake. Dr. Sarah Chen compiled these reports with growing fascination. She's not conquering systems for power or resources, she realized during a late-night research session. She's trying to save them from themselves. In her mind, she's the only one responsible enough to make decisions for entire species. The implications were staggering. Every species Queen Zithera had conquered had probably resisted with conventional military force, proving to her that they were too violent and chaotic to govern themselves. Their defeat validated her worldview. But humans weren't responding conventionally. Instead of massing armies, they were forming study groups. Instead of building weapons, they were building understanding. Instead of preparing for war, they were preparing for something Queen Zithara had never encountered before, a species that could fight her with compassion. She expects us to either submit or attack, Sarah explained to the Global Resistance Coordination meeting. Both responses confirm her beliefs about species needing her guidance. But what if we do neither? What's the third option? Asked Dr. Zhang from Beijing. We prove her wrong by demonstrating something she's never seen before, a species that can solve its own problems without destroying itself or surrendering its freedom. The plan that emerged from human collaboration was simultaneously simple and impossible. They would solve Queen Zithara's fundamental problem, the trauma that drove her to conquer, while simultaneously proving that her conquest was unnecessary. Teams worldwide began working on 3 objectives: decode the technology that kept her ship operational, understand the psychological framework that drove her need to control others, and prepare a demonstration of human capability that would challenge every assumption she held about intelligent species. Marcus Webb's garage team made the first breakthrough. By studying the ship's micro-movements and cross-referencing with gravitational data, they determined that Queen Zithera's vessel wasn't truly violating physics. It was using a form of controlled space-time manipulation that required precise mental discipline to maintain. She's not just commanding the ship, Elena realized during one of their midnight sessions. She's willing it to stay aloft through sheer mental force. No wonder her species died out. This kind of power would require absolute individual control. In Moscow, a team of psychologists worked with the children's dream reports to construct a psychological profile of Queen Zithera. What they discovered broke their hearts and filled them with determination. She's alone, reported Dr. Volkova to the international conference. Completely, utterly alone. Her species evolved individual power, but never learned collective cooperation. When they destroyed themselves, she survived by taking absolute responsibility for everything. She's been carrying the weight of galactic civilization on her shoulders for centuries. The final piece came from an unexpected source. Sister Margaret Mary, a nun working with refugee children in Kenya, noticed something others had missed. The children don't just dream about her past, she reported. They dream about her future. And in every vision, she's still alone. She can't imagine any other way to exist. This revelation transformed humanity's response. Queen Zithera wasn't just a conqueror, she was a being so traumatized by loss that she had made herself responsible for preventing any other species from experiencing what hers had endured. Defeating her wouldn't solve anything. She would simply see human victory as proof that they were too dangerous to remain free. Instead, humanity began preparing something no species had ever offered Queen Zithera before: the chance to not be alone anymore. The plan required every human capability, their technology, their empathy, their stubborn refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. Most importantly, it required them to prove that a species could be both strong enough to resist conquest and wise enough not to destroy themselves with that strength. As news of the plan spread through the grassroots networks that had formed around the world, something remarkable happened. Humans began to see themselves as Queen Zathera saw them, a chaotic, violent, unpredictable species that somehow kept finding ways to work together when everything was at stake. For the first time in their history, humanity had a common purpose that transcended every division among them. They weren't just fighting for their freedom. They were fighting to heal a wound that had festered across the galaxy for centuries. The real confrontation was about to begin, and Queen Zathera had no idea what was coming. 2 months after her arrival, Queen Zathera began to notice that Earth wasn't behaving like her previous conquests. Instead of the expected chaos and eventual surrender, human activity had intensified in ways that defied her understanding. From her ship's vast command chamber, she observed the planet below with growing confusion. Rather than armies massing for futile battles, humans were building something unprecedented, a global network of cooperation that operated without central authority. "Curious," she murmured in her native tongue, a language of harmonics that could shatter crystal. Her forearms manipulated holographic displays showing human activities across the globe. They organize without hierarchy. They share information without profit motive. They work toward common goals while maintaining individual autonomy. This behavior violated every principle she understood about intelligent species. In her experience, beings capable of complex thought inevitably fell into one of 2 categories: those who submitted to necessary authority, and those who destroyed themselves fighting against it. Her contemplation was interrupted by an unexpected event. Every communication device on Earth activated simultaneously, not with her signal, but with something originating from the planet itself. The message was simple. "Queen Zathera, we request a meeting." For the first time in centuries, someone was voluntarily initiating contact with her, rather than responding to her demands. The novelty intrigued her enough to accept. Dr. Sarah Chen materialized in the ship's transport beam, but she wasn't alone. With her came representatives of humanity's new global collaboration. Marcus Webb with his practical engineering insights, Dr. Volkova with her psychological expertise, Sister Margaret Mary representing humanity's spiritual dimension, and a dozen others from every continent and walk of life. Queen Zathera studied them with her galaxy eyes, noting their lack of fear. Previous species representatives had always approached her with terror, defiance, or resignation. These humans showed something different, determination mixed with what appeared to be sympathy. "You wish to negotiate surrender terms," she stated, though something in their bearing suggested otherwise. "Actually, we want to offer you a job," Marcus Webb replied with his characteristic directness. The Queen's massive form stilled completely. In 800 years of conquest, no one had ever said those words to her. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward. "We've been studying your situation, Your Majesty. Through the dreams you've been unconsciously sharing with our children, we understand your history. Your species achieved individual transcendence but never learned collective cooperation. When they destroyed themselves, you survived by taking absolute responsibility for preventing other species from making the same mistake." "That is an accurate assessment," Queen Zathera replied carefully. "The problem," Dr. Volkova added gently, "is that you've been trying to solve a collective problem with individual solutions. You maintain order through personal control, but that method can't scale indefinitely. Eventually, you'll encounter a challenge too large for any one being to handle alone." Queen Zathera's eyes narrowed. "I have successfully governed 47 star systems for centuries. My methods have proven effective." "Your methods have proven stable," corrected Sister Margaret Mary. "But stability isn't the same as growth or healing. You've prevented your subject species from destroying themselves, but you've also prevented them from learning how not to destroy themselves." The Queen's forearms gestured dismissively. "Species cannot be trusted with such learning. They inevitably choose conflict over cooperation." "Some do," Marcus agreed. "But you've been working with incomplete data. You've only encountered species after they've reached the point of self-destruction. You've never seen what happens when a species learns to cooperate before reaching that crisis point. Queen Zathara processed this statement. Her experiences had indeed been limited to species that contacted her, or came to her attention through catastrophic events. She had never observed natural development of interstellar cooperation. Earth is different, Dr. Chen continued. We've reached the brink of self-destruction multiple times, but we've always found ways to step back. Nuclear weapons, climate change, resource depletion. Each time we've developed collective solutions without surrendering individual agency. Your species is chaotic, Queen Zathara objected. You fight constant wars. You pollute your environment. You allow vast inequalities. We're messy, Marcus admitted with a grin, but we're messy in productive ways. Our conflicts drive innovation. Our environmental mistakes teach us to develop better technologies. Our inequalities motivate us to create more inclusive systems. Dr. Volkova pulled out a tablet displaying global statistics from the past 2 months. Since your arrival, human cooperation has reached unprecedented levels. War casualties are down 90%. Scientific collaboration has increased by orders of magnitude. Economic inequality is declining for the first time in decades. You unified them through fear, Queen Zathara stated. No, Sister Margaret Mary replied softly. You unified them through purpose. For the first time in our history, we had a problem that required everyone working together. We didn't need a ruler to tell us what to do. We needed a reason to discover what we could. To the Queen's expression, if her alien features could be interpreted as such, showed something that might have been surprised, Dr. Chen seized the moment. This is what we want to offer you. Partnership instead of conquest. You have knowledge and perspective we need. We have cooperative capabilities you've never encountered. Together we might solve the problem that's driven you to take responsibility for entire galaxies. What problem? Queen Zathara asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Loneliness, Dr. Volkova said simply. You've been carrying the weight of galactic civilization alone for centuries. But you don't have to anymore. Queen Zathara stood silent for long minutes. When she finally spoke, her voice carried harmonics that her human guests felt in their bones. No species has ever offered alliance to one who conquered their neighbors. Maybe that's because you never gave them the chance to understand what you're really trying to accomplish, Marcus suggested. Or maybe, added Dr. Chen, humanity is just crazy enough to think that even impossible problems have solutions. The Queen's 4 arms moved in complex patterns, manipulating displays that showed her 47 conquered systems. If I were to consider this alliance, what would you propose? Joint governance, Dr. Chen replied immediately. Your subject species learn self-determination while you learn delegation. Humans serve as intermediaries, helping other species develop cooperative capabilities while you provide guidance and stability. The transition would be gradual, Dr. Volkova added. Species that have been under your control for generations will need time to remember how to make decisions for themselves. And you would be responsible for managing this transition? Queen Zathara asked. We would be responsible for figuring out how to manage it together, Sister Margaret Mary corrected. No one person or species has all the answers. But pooled human creativity plus your experience and wisdom might be enough. Marcus leaned forward. The job offer is this. Instead of being the galaxy's sole ruler, become its first teacher. Help species learn to help themselves. And when you face challenges too big for any one being to handle, you'll have entire civilizations working with you instead of just obeying you. Queen Zathara's galaxy eyes seemed to brighten. This proposal is unprecedented. It violates established principles of interstellar governance. Good, Dr. Chen said with a smile. We've found that violating established principles is how you discover better ones. The Queen studied each human face, searching for deception or hidden agenda. What she found instead was something that challenged every assumption she had about intelligent life. Beings capable of seeing past their own immediate needs to address the needs of someone who had threatened their freedom. You would trust me with such authority? She asked. We would trust you to learn how to share such authority, corrected Dr. Volkova. For the first time in centuries, Queen Zathara found herself considering possibilities that extended beyond control and conquest. The human's proposal was dangerous, unprecedented, and utterly unlike anything she had ever encountered. It was also, she began to realize, exactly what both she and the galaxy needed. I will consider your proposal, she announced finally, but I will require demonstrations that your species can maintain cooperation without external crisis motivation." "Fair enough," Marcus said. "How long do you need? How long do you need to prove that humans can solve problems instead of just managing them?" The humans exchanged glances, and Dr. Chen spoke for all of them. "Give us 6 months to show you what humanity can do when we're not fighting for survival, when we're building for the future." Queen Zathara's agreement would change everything for both species, but neither she nor the humans fully understood yet just how much everything was about to change. Queen Zathara's tests began immediately, and they were nothing like what humanity expected. Instead of military challenges or technological puzzles, she presented them with exact replicas of the crises that had destroyed other species. The first test arrived without warning: a complete shutdown of global communication networks. "Previous species have always responded to communication loss with violence," she announced through the ship's local speakers, her voice reaching only those in immediate vicinity of her vessel. "They assume enemies have struck first. They panic. They attack blindly. I am curious to observe human behavior under identical circumstances." Around the world, phones went dead. Internet connections vanished. Satellite communications ceased. Television and radio broadcasts stopped mid-sentence. For the first time in decades, humanity found itself truly disconnected from its global nervous system. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in Central Park, watching Queen Zithara's ship through binoculars as emergency sirens began wailing across New York City. Around her, people pulled out dead phones, frantically pressing buttons that produced no response. But something remarkable happened. Instead of panic, people began talking to each other. "My name's Jennifer," a woman in a business suit said to a group of strangers. "I'm supposed to meet my daughter at school, but I can't call her. Anyone know the way to PS 84? "I can walk you there," offered a construction worker. "I was heading that way anyway to check on my crew." Across the city, similar conversations sprouted. People who hadn't spoken to their neighbors in years knocked on doors to share information. Businesses that competed fiercely began coordinating to maintain essential services. Marcus Webb found himself organizing his neighborhood's response from his garage, which became an impromptu community center. Elena Rodriguez used her engineering knowledge to rig battery-powered radios for local communication. The high school physics teacher calculated optimal routes for human messengers to carry information between districts. "This is incredible," Elena whispered to Marcus as they watched their neighbors transform from isolated individuals into a functioning community network. "We're not falling apart, we're linking up." Similar transformations occurred worldwide. In Tokyo, office workers formed human chains to share stock market information. In London, taxi drivers created informal courier networks. In Mumbai, street vendors became information hubs connecting different neighborhoods. Queen Zathara observed these developments with growing confusion. Her displays showed human cooperation increasing dramatically rather than decreasing. Crime rates plummeted. Emergency response became more efficient. Economic systems continued functioning through improvised human networks. "Impossible," she murmured in her crystalline command chamber. The Mathari descended into tribal warfare within 6 hours of communication loss. The Kethvar began bombing each other's cities after 12 hours. These humans are approaching their second day of disconnection, and they are becoming more organized, not less. Her confusion deepened when reports reached her of human behavior in conflict zones. In areas where wars had raged for decades, opposing armies had begun cooperative searches for missing civilians. Enemies shared supplies and medical assistance. Ancient hatred seemed to evaporate in the face of the communication crisis. On the third day, human ingenuity produced its first major breakthrough. A teenager in Seoul named Kim Min-jun figured out how to bounce radio signals off Queen Zathara's ship itself, effectively turning the alien vessel into a communication relay. "The ship's hull reflects certain frequencies in predictable patterns," he explained to a gathering crowd through his improvised radio setup. "If we coordinate our broadcast properly, we can create a global network using the Queen's own ship as the satellite." Within hours, Kim's discovery spread through human messenger networks. Radio operators worldwide began implementing his technique. By sunset of the third day, humanity had restored global communication using Queen Zathara's ship as their unwitting infrastructure. The Queen found herself in the unprecedented position of being outmaneuvered by the very species she was testing. "They turned my test into their solution," She reported to her ship's computer systems, though she had no one else to speak with. I have never encountered adaptive behavior of this magnitude. She decided to escalate the testing. The second trial removed all electrical power from Earth's surface. Every generator, every power plant, every battery stopped functioning. The planet went dark. Previous species had responded to power loss with desperation and violence as their technological civilizations collapsed. Queen Zathera expected similar results from humans. Instead, humanity treated the power outage as an engineering puzzle. Dr. Chen found herself working by candlelight in a basement laboratory that had been converted into a think tank. Around her, dozens of the world's brightest minds attacked the problem using nothing but paper, pencils, and human ingenuity. The power isn't destroyed, observed Dr. Patel, a physicist from Mumbai who had traveled to New York on foot. It's being suppressed. That means whatever's causing the effect can be analyzed and potentially circumvented. More importantly, added Professor Williams from Oxford, it means the Queen is demonstrating capabilities she wants us to understand. This isn't just a test, it's a lesson. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sister Margaret Mary, working with a group of children who had been experiencing the shared dreams, realized that the power suppression followed the same patterns as Queen Zathera's emotional state. When she's calm, the effect is stable, the nun reported to the candlelit assembly. When she's agitated, it fluctuates. The children can sense her mood changes through their dream connection. Marcus Webb seized on this insight. If her emotions affect the suppression field, then maybe we can affect her emotions. What followed was perhaps the most audacious plan in human history. Using nothing but acoustic signals, drums, horns, and human voices, people worldwide began creating music aimed at reaching Queen Zathera's ship. The composition that emerged was unlike anything humanity had ever produced. It combined elements from every culture: African drums, Asian string instruments, European symphonies, American jazz, and dozens of other traditions. But the melody itself was new, created specifically to communicate human resilience and hope to an alien mind. As the global concert reached its crescendo, something unprecedented happened aboard Queen Zathera's ship. For the first time in centuries, she felt something other than loneliness or duty. She felt wonder. The power suppression field fluctuated, then failed completely. Earth's lights began returning as humanity's spontaneous symphony echoed across the planet. Queen Zathera materialized once again in Central Park, but her demeanor had changed. The imperious conqueror was gone, replaced by something approaching wonder. How? She asked Dr. Chen, who had been coordinating the human response. How did you determine that harmonic resonance could affect my ship's systems? We didn't, Dr. Chen replied honestly. We just figured that if you were testing us, you probably wanted to see how we'd respond. So we responded the most human way possible. We turned the problem into an opportunity to do something beautiful together. Queen. Zathera's forearms moved in complex patterns that might have indicated confusion or admiration. The Mathari attempted to build signal fires to reach my ship. The Kethavar tried to construct electromagnetic pulse devices. No species has ever attempted to communicate through organized emotional resonance. Maybe they were thinking too much like conquerors, suggested Marcus Webb, who had walked over from his neighborhood coordination post. We decided to think like neighbors instead. The Queen's galaxy eyes fixed on him. Neighbors? Sure. Marcus continued with his characteristic directness. You're sitting in our sky. You've got problems we can help solve. We've got problems you can help solve. That makes us neighbors. Neighbors look out for each other. Sister Margaret Mary approached, followed by several of the children who had been having the shared dreams. Your Majesty, the nun said gently, the children want to know if you'd like them to stop feeling your sadness. They say it's too heavy for someone to carry alone. For a long moment, Queen Zathera stood perfectly still. Then, for the first time in 8 centuries, she allowed her mental barriers to lower completely. The wave of emotion that swept across Earth was overwhelming. Grief for a lost species, exhaustion from centuries of self-imposed responsibility, terror at the possibility of failing those she had sworn to protect, and underneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made hearts ache worldwide. But something else flowed back to her through the dream connection the children had maintained. It came from every human on the planet, acceptance, understanding, and an offer of companionship that no one had ever extended to her before. The tests were over. What came next would determine the future of multiple star systems. Queen Zathara had learned something that contradicted everything she thought she knew about intelligent species. These humans didn't just adapt to challenges, they transformed challenges into opportunities for greater connection. Now she had to decide whether she was ready to abandon 8 centuries of absolute control in favor of something she had never experienced before, true partnership. The transformation began with a single word that Queen Zathara had never spoken before: please. Standing in the center of what had become humanity's impromptu outdoor parliament in Central Park, the towering alien queen addressed the assembled representatives and the millions watching through restored communication networks. I have governed 47 star systems through absolute authority, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with something deeper than hearing. I have prevented wars, eliminated famines, and maintained peace through my will alone. But I have also prevented growth, stifled innovation, and denied entire species the right to make their own mistakes. She paused, her forearms moving in patterns that Dr. Chen was beginning to recognize as expressions of uncertainty. You have shown me something I thought impossible. A species that grows, stronger through cooperation rather than weaker through chaos. Now I ask something I have never asked before. Will you help me learn how to step back without everything falling apart? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Not formal diplomatic agreements or carefully negotiated treaties, but something characteristically human, spontaneous offers of practical assistance. We'll need to start with systems where your control is lightest, suggested Dr. Chen. Give species small choices first and see how they handle freedom, gradually. I've got buddies who work in management, consulting, added Marcus Webb. Transition planning is basically what they do, help organizations change without destroying themselves in the process. The children want to help, Sister Margaret Mary reported. They say they can feel which of your subject species are ready for more independence and which ones need more time. Queen Zathara found herself experiencing something entirely foreign. The relief of shared responsibility. For 8 centuries, every decision affecting millions of beings had rested solely on her judgment. Now humans were voluntarily offering to share that burden. The first test case was the Veltai system, a species that had been under Queen Zathara's governance for only 50 years. Through the children's dream link, she had learned that the Veltai retained strong memories of self-governance and had been quietly organizing informal leadership structures. Despite her absolute rule, we're going to try something that's never been attempted in galactic history, Dr. Chen announced to the Global Coordination Network. Gradual decolonization of an interstellar empire. The process they developed was uniquely human in its improvisation and universal in its principles. Teams of human observers would work with Queen Zathara to identify species ready for increased autonomy. Local councils would be established with minimal powers initially, managing resource distribution, resolving minor disputes, organizing cultural events. Queen Zathara would retain ultimate authority, but would exercise it only when explicitly requested by local councils or in genuine emergencies. Most importantly, decisions would be transparent and explained rather than simply imposed. Marcus Webb found himself aboard Queen Zathara's ship, working with alien engineers to modify the vessel's command systems. Instead of controlling everything directly through her mental connection, the Queen would learn to use advisory networks and cooperative decision-making processes. It's like teaching someone who's been driving solo for 800 years how to use a GPS and co-pilot, he explained to his wife over their evening video call. She's got to learn to trust information that doesn't come from her own direct observation. The first day of the experiment nearly ended in disaster. Without Queen Zathara's constant mental oversight, a resource distribution error on Veltai led to food shortages in 3 major cities. The local council, unpracticed in crisis management, began making contradictory emergency decisions. Queen Zathara's immediate impulse was to resume direct control, but Dr. Volkova, now serving as the project's psychological coordinator, convinced her to wait. This is exactly what you've been preventing for centuries, Dr. Volkova explained through the ship's communication system. species learning from their mistakes. If you fix this for them, they'll never learn how to fix it themselves. Instead, human advisors worked with the Veltai Council to develop rapid response protocols. The food shortage was resolved within 3 days using local resources and newly established emergency distribution networks. More importantly, the Veltai government had learned to handle a crisis without external intervention. The interesting discovery, reported Dr. Chen in her daily briefing to Earth, is that species under the Queen's control haven't lost their problem-solving abilities. They've just stopped practicing them. When given the chance, they remember how to cooperate remarkably quickly. This insight transformed the entire approach. Rather than viewing the subject species as dependents who needed to learn self-governance from scratch, the project began treating them as capable beings who simply needed opportunities to remember skills they already possessed. Queen Zithara struggled with this conceptual shift more than anyone had anticipated. 8 centuries of absolute responsibility had convinced her that her subjects were genuinely incapable of self-governance. Watching them succeed at managing their own affairs triggered something approaching an identity crisis. If they can govern themselves, she confided to Dr. Chen during one of their regular planning sessions, what purpose do I serve? What has been the point of everything I have done? Sister Margaret Mary, who had become an unexpected counselor to the alien queen, provided the answer that changed everything. Maybe the point was never to control them permanently, she suggested gently. Maybe the point was to keep them safe until they were ready to keep themselves safe. Parents don't raise children to remain children forever. They raise them to become capable adults who don't need parents anymore. The metaphor of parenthood resonated with Queen Zithara in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. Her species had never developed family structures, reproducing through a complex biological process that involved no ongoing relationships. The concept of nurturing others toward independence rather than permanent dependence was entirely foreign to her, but she found it strangely compelling. As the experiment expanded to include more star systems, patterns began emerging that challenged everyone's assumptions about interstellar governance. Species that had been controlled for centuries didn't immediately descend into chaos when given freedom. Instead, they often surpassed their pre-conquest achievements within decades. The Cathara, who had been subjects for over 200 years, developed sustainable energy technologies that surpassed anything Queen Zithara had provided them. The Morel discovered breakthrough medical treatments for genetic diseases that had plagued them for millennia. The Zephyrians began exploring artistic expressions that combined traditional forms with innovations inspired by their liberation experience. It's like we've been watching civilizations in stasis for centuries, marveled Dr. Chen as she reviewed progress reports from 12 different systems. As soon as they're allowed to grow again, they explode with creativity and innovation. Queen Zithara found herself experiencing emotions she had no names for. Pride in her former subjects' achievements mixed with regret for opportunities lost during centuries of imposed stagnation. But underneath both feelings was something entirely new, excitement about the future. For the first time in 8 centuries, she didn't know what would happen next. Instead of terrifying her, the uncertainty felt liberating. I am learning, she announced to the assembled human coordinators and alien representatives during a monthly progress meeting, that not knowing the outcome of a decision in advance does not necessarily mean the decision is wrong. Marcus Webb grinned at her. Welcome to being human, Your Majesty. We've been flying blind and hoping for the best for our entire history. Seems to be working out pretty well so far. The great experiment was succeeding beyond anyone's expectations, but its success was creating new challenges that no one had anticipated. Other galactic powers, who had viewed Queen Zithara's empire as a stable buffer against chaotic younger species, began expressing concern about the changes. Independence movements started stirring in star systems controlled by different alien powers. And somewhere in the depths of space, older and more powerful entities began taking notice of the unprecedented transformation happening in Queen Zithara's former domain. The humans and their alien partners were about to discover that their success had made them visible to forces in the galaxy that preferred the old ways of absolute control and eternal stability. Change, they were learning, was never welcomed by everyone, especially by those who benefited from the way things had always been. The warning came from the edge of the galaxy, transmitted through quantum channels that Queen Zithara had thought were known only to her. Youngling Zithara, the message began, using a title that made the Queen's crystalline form tremble with recognition. You have disrupted the ancient order. The Eternal Council convenes. Your presence is required. Dr. Sarah Chen felt the Queen's distress through the psychic connection that had developed between humans and their alien ally. Across Earth, sensitive individuals, particularly children, began experiencing nightmares filled with vast, cold intelligences and spaces between stars where time moved differently. Who is the Eternal Council? Dr. Chen asked as she materialized aboard Queen Zithara's ship through the transport system they now shared. The Queen's forearms moved in patterns Dr. Chen had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. They are what I will become if I live another 1,000,000 years, she replied, her voice carrying harmonics of ancient fear. Beings who have transcended individual existence to become living embodiments of cosmic order. That doesn't sound so bad, Marcus Webb offered, joining them through his own transport beam. He had become surprisingly comfortable with casual interstellar travel. They are no longer capable of change, Queen Zithara explained. They have existed for so long that they perceive any alteration to galactic structure as an existential threat. They view the liberation of my former subjects as chaos that must be contained. Sister Margaret Mary's voice came through the communication system from Earth. The children are saying you're afraid of them, but not afraid they'll hurt you. You're afraid you'll become them. Queen Zithara's galaxy-filled eyes dimmed slightly. The path from protector to controller to cosmic force is apparently inevitable for beings of my type. The Council represents what I thought I had to become to prevent galactic catastrophe, but you humans have shown me another possibility. Dr. Volkova's psychological insight cut to the heart of the matter. They're not just opposing our experiment in liberation. They're opposing the idea that transcendent beings can choose to remain connected to lesser species rather than evolving beyond the need for such connections. The implications were staggering. Queen Zithara's transformation from absolute ruler to cooperative partner wasn't just a local political change, it was challenging fundamental assumptions about the nature of cosmic evolution held by entities. With the power to reshape star systems, what will they do? Dr. Chen asked. They will attempt to return me to proper thinking, Queen Zithara replied. If that fails, they will remove me and appoint a replacement who understands the necessity of unchanging order. Marcus frowned. And our newly liberated species get dragged back into servitude? Worse. They will be prevented from ever again developing the capability for independence. The Council does not make the same mistake twice. The response from humanity was characteristically direct and impossible. They decided to attend the Council meeting themselves. You can't simply appear before cosmic entities, Queen Zithara protested. They exist partially outside normal space-time. They communicate through concepts that would destroy unprotected minds. They are older than your son. So they're really stuck in their ways, Dr. Chen replied with the kind of confidence that had gotten humanity this far. Perfect. We specialize in helping people see new perspectives. What followed was perhaps the most audacious diplomatic mission in galactic history, using technologies adapted from Queen Zithara's ship and protected by psychic shielding developed through the children's dream link. A human delegation prepared to enter a realm where abstract concepts had physical form and time flowed according to thought rather than physics. The team was carefully selected. Dr. Chen for her scientific curiosity, Marcus Webb for his practical problem-solving skills, Sister Margaret Mary for her spiritual insight, Dr. Volkova for her understanding of consciousness, and surprisingly, 8-year-old Tommy Liu from San Francisco. The boy sees connections that adults miss, Sister Margaret Mary explained when questioned about including a child. If we're going to communicate with beings who think in cosmic terms, we need someone who naturally thinks beyond normal limitations. Queen Zithara's transformation from protector to partner reached its culmination as she modified her ship's systems to carry humans safely into the Council's domain. For the first time in her existence, she was working as an equal partner rather than as either ruler or subject. The journey to the Council's meeting place defied description. Space folded around them in ways that hurt to contemplate. Stars became letters in a language written across the galaxy. Time moved in spirals and loops that somehow still led forward. When they arrived, the human delegation found themselves in a space that was simultaneously vast as the galaxy and intimate as a conversation circle. The Eternal Council manifested as geometric forms of living mathematics, each representing concepts that had evolved beyond the need for individual identity. Scythera, the collective voice resonated through dimensions humans could barely perceive. You have brought chaos bringers to our sacred space. I have brought teachers, Queen Zathara replied, her own form growing larger and more complex in response to the Council's presence. They have shown me that order and growth are not incompatible. Growth leads to unpredictability. Unpredictability leads to destruction. We have observed this cycle across countless species for eons beyond counting. Tommy Lou stepped forward, his child's voice somehow audible across cosmic distances. But what if you're wrong? The silence that followed was absolute. Entities that had existed since before Earth-Sun formed had been asked to consider the possibility of error by a being who had existed for less than a decade. Elaborate, small chaotic one, came the eventual response. You've been watching species destroy themselves for millions of years, Tommy continued with the fearless logic of childhood. But you never let any of them try not destroying themselves. So how do you know they all would? Dr. Chen felt a flutter of hope as she recognized the essential human approach, questioning assumptions that everyone else accepted as truth. Marcus Webb built on Tommy's insight with characteristic directness. You folks have been running the same experiment for eons, control species to prevent chaos. But you've never run the control group experiment. Let species learn to prevent their own chaos. The risk of failure is unacceptable, the Council responded. Chaos spreads. Failed experiments contaminate neighboring systems. Sister Margaret Mary spoke with the gentle authority she brought to difficult conversations with traumatized children. But perfect order without growth isn't really life anymore, is it? It's just very organized death. Maybe some risk is necessary for anything meaningful to exist. Dr. Volkova added her psychological perspective. You've achieved immortality and cosmic power, but you've lost the ability to change or learn. That's not evolution, that's a developmental dead end. The Council's response shifted to something that might have been anger, though expressed through alterations in the fundamental constants of local spacetime. We maintain stability across multiple galactic arms. We prevent the heat death of consciousness itself. By making everything the same as it's always been, Queen Zathara said, her voice carrying new harmonics that surprised even her. But I have learned that maintaining something is not the same as helping it thrive. Young Tommy made the observation that changed everything. You're scared that if you let things change, everything you've worked for will get broken. But maybe everything you've worked for is already broken, and you just don't want to admit it. The cosmic entities that composed the Eternal Council fell silent for what felt like centuries, but was probably only moments. When they finally responded, their voice carried undertones that none of the humans had heard before. Uncertainty. If we permit this experiment to continue and chaos results, entire sectors of the galaxy may become uninhabitable. If you prevent this experiment from continuing, Dr. Chen replied, entire sectors of the galaxy will never become anything more than they are now. Both choices have risks, but only one choice offers the possibility of something better. Queen Zathara made her final argument. I have spent 8 centuries believing that control was kindness. These humans have taught me that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is trust others to find their own way. Even if they fail, even if their failure hurts you. The Council's deliberation occurred across dimensions of thought that human minds couldn't directly access. But through the psychic link, the delegation could sense vast intelligences wrestling with concepts they hadn't considered for millions of years. When the judgment came, it arrived in the form of a question rather than a decree. If we permit this experiment to continue, will you accept responsibility for any chaos that results? The human delegation exchanged glances, and Dr. Chen spoke for all of them. We'll accept responsibility for helping clean up any chaos that results. But we won't accept responsibility for preventing all risks everywhere. That's not responsibility. That's just a different kind of control. Queen Zathara added her voice to theirs. I accept partnership in managing whatever consequences arise, rather than absolute authority to prevent all possibilities of consequences. The Eternal Council's final decision would determine the fate of dozens of star systems, NT,